Wow, hello. Can I ask a favor, just really quickly? Give me the slides real quick. One, incredible listening to Dr. Mubadi. Sometimes you feel like things connect for a reason. But now I want to ask you for a favor. If you can you all stand up where you are? Okay. Plant your feet. As I say, pay attention to your breath. Take a deep breath. Look at the screens. Feel yourself floating up above the room, up above the building, up above Austin and Texas. Out, 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 until you sit above the world in that place where you look and you see nothing but the beautiful blue, green, and white. I want you to float there and let all the things that trouble us go away. I want you to stay in that relaxed place and remember that you're not there, but you're in the collective with everyone else who shares this world. And now you can sit down. I wanted you to go to that place because when you're in that place, it's really easy to forget about a lot of things and get to that place where you believe that the possibilities are actually endless. I have two sons, 9 and 15, and I tell them, look, almost anything is possible. There are 4 questions you have to work through. The first question is, what do you believe? What do you believe is possible? The second question is, what are you willing to do to make it so? The third question is, what do you know how to do? And the fourth is, can you actually get it done? Can you execute? For many of us in this room, that simple set of questions actually is something that if you don't think about it, you do every single day. And you're in the world where possibilities are endless. And I believe that. But I also believe that the possibilities are not inevitable. And they definitely are not available to everyone. We've got challenges that face us, whether in the environment or in society and our political systems, or inequality, which we just heard a lot about, that we have to overcome. This is not unique for us. Every generation has had to prepare the next generation to take care of the challenges that they face, many of which, we create for them. What is unique is that the pace of change and challenge is accelerating. In fact, some of the things that seem like opportunities, we now see much more clearly as having a double edge and being a possible threat. Whether it's AI or robots, autonomous cars taking millions of jobs, people are afraid many times by the things that are creating our future. And it has, for many of the people in this room who think about education, changed lifelong learning from a cliche to a survival tactic. It actually means something. Now, I frame it this way because what I find is that confronted with that reality, by the way, I spent most of my life really despising people who say there are 2 kinds of people. But there are 2 kinds of people. There are folks who are confronted with those kinds of facts, and all they can see is the strife and struggle and potential despair that comes with a rapidly changing world and all the things that are wrong with it. And they can't see the way out, and they drop into self-preservation. And things become very zero-sum. And then there are those who see those challenges and they are optimistic. They still believe in the possibilities despite the challenges ahead. And in fact, they believe that we can overcome them. I consider myself, call it a Stockdale optimist. I am totally willing to embrace and talk a lot about the brutal facts. I'm not the cheery speaker. But I have an extraordinary confidence that we will prevail in the end. And luckily for me, I work for people who actually believe the same thing. And they root that belief in their belief in human potential. That if we can actually tap the gifts of every human in the world, then we can actually change the world in the ways that we need to for us to continue to have a bright future. Now, for me, I translate this very simply. It's taken me many years to realize that it's fundamentally about giving people power. Now, that's power by a very specific definition. I believe that power is the ability to create, limit, or make choices for oneself or others. And that when you give people power, you give them the opportunity to shape their destiny and the destiny of the world. And so what it means to educate people in that context is to give them power and equip them to use it well. We are in the power business. And with that power, we can build a future for everyone. It's built by everyone. Now, this is not pie in the sky optimism. The reality is that we have already shown that every single human has the potential to outperform many of the limitations that we have heretofore thought were true. We've seen children who outperform by 1 and 2 standard deviations what happens in our traditional classrooms. We've seen people break generation after generation the records that were set the years before. We just have to figure out how to make it happen. Now, I want to pause here because a lot of times when we've talked about education and we've talked about changing the world, we still have had this very narrow view of what it means to educate. And very narrow view of what we are doing when we are trying to teach and learn. What we have to have if we're going to achieve our aspirations of tapping people's potential and allowing them to actually solve the problems of the world is to recognize, frankly, what we've heard many times over. That in fact, we don't need to teach content, we need to teach children. And they are people. And those people are multidimensional. And as you heard from Dr. Mubadi, it starts with things like basic physical health and mental health. Why were you hear that the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative invested in getting low-income kids glasses in ways that's highly scalable? Because there are 2 million children in this country who don't have access to glasses, who can't see the board, and who have no shot at reaching their potential, when we already have a solution at hand, an affordable one. Or mental health. All of us have now heard about ACEs and the impact it has on your ability to do almost anything. And so that's why we're investing in organizations like Turnaround for Children to help schools with the kind of resources and tools that they need to deal with students who are dealing with trauma and to connect to the social services that will help them if they can't be helped in school. It's the reason that we pay attention to healthy identity development, not only for yourself, but the group in which you reside and the community in which you reside. Because we know that that actually changes how you think about how you approach problems and your confidence in doing those problems. As well as the cognitive development and the academic development, all of those things are actually important and they are interplay constantly. I have a colleague who is a learning scientist named actually like himself a learning engineer named Boris Saxberg. You know, this gives this really interesting example of 2 kids struggling with the same basic math problem. One struggling because they actually have gaps in their instruction from previously, and the other struggling because they just don't think they're very good at math. Those deserve different treatments. They are not the same. And when you actually take them as an integrated whole, and you begin to take a holistic view of how you actually reach that individual student, personalize their experience in a way that draws on the best of what they can do for themselves and what they can gather from their peers and what a teacher can do for them, you have the opportunity to reach them in a way that we have failed to reach the vast majority of our students. Sometimes when people talk about personalized learning, they make the mistake of thinking it means individual. You're off somewhere in a corner on your own. Personalized means personal. What is it going to take for you to be successful? And how do we create those kinds of environments and experiences and relationships by which all of this is mediated at scale, so every single child can have it? Now, the important thing to remember here is two things. One is, this is not a framework for other people's children. This is a framework for human development. This is all of us. This is how we do our thing. And the good news about it is it's not like we don't know this stuff. Whether you go back to Piaget or Montessori or Comer, in terms of the experts, or you talk to your grandma, that contact, that relationship, the safe environment, all the things that you try and create for your own child to let them thrive. The things that you think that they need, and so do all others. And it turns out that it not only works for empowering girls that grow up in healthy development, but it also can work for boys that grow up in stressful environments, that may have already had trouble, that may already be behind, that may already have had trauma, that may already have gotten involved with the law. Raise your hand if you've heard of the Becoming a Man program. That was pretty low, but it's okay. So I just want to call it out because oftentimes we see the great pictures of very young children. And what this program did is it targeted young men who were over age, on their way into high school, behind in mathematics, and had been involved with the courts. It was actually run by the crime lab, not the education lab in Chicago, University of Chicago. And what they discovered was, with an intervention to help young men make better decisions, slower decisions, control their impulses, and combining it with intensive tutoring, they were able to get those young men to accelerate in math, what looks like now for the second year, by 2 or more years than 1. By the way, it also reduced re-involvement with crime by more than half. Lives changed by things that we know. And that doesn't necessarily just have to apply here in the US, it can apply anywhere. Even in places where they have very little, we can create the safe and supportive environments and the kinds of relationships and experiences that let all children excel. Now, this is hardly news, and that's the sad part. The question is, if we all already believe everything I just said, then what are we willing to do and what do we know how to do? Now, the great news is we know a lot. There's a lot we could be taking and doing in our schools and our systems today that we are not doing. But there's also a lot that we still need to learn to do. And in order to achieve our aspirations, we're not going to hunt and gather best practices. We've tried for a while. We've got to be much more disciplined about the way we actually learn about learning. And the possibility of learning faster about learning than we ever have before is upon us. It's one of these opportunities that's unique. So one of the things you're going to hear a lot about us investing in as Chan Zuckerberg is in learning science and learning engineering, and how we actually take advantage of the ecosystem that does exist, as broken as it is in many ways, to start to really move the field much more quickly towards solutions that actually change people's lives. It's going to start with doing work around better measurement. Not sexy, but needed. Most of those domains outside of our traditional academic areas, we don't have good and valid measures for our kids making progress. Are they demonstrating the proper developmental level of competence? What are the interventions that actually make the most difference? And the only way that we're going to be able to know the answers to those questions is to have better measures. We also need to work the other side of the equation, which is to create the incentives for more things that work and produce evidence that they work. That's policy work, that's education and capacity building work. But if we don't create an environment where the things that actually work pull those things that we create that do work, so that it makes really good sense to invest more in product efficacy and evaluation than it does in marketing and sales, it's going to be really hard to get to the place where we can serve everyone. And we've got great examples of this already. Third, you may have heard me say our ecosystem overall is broken. And it is in a lot of different ways. But what we can do is create mini ecosystems that accelerate the pace at which we learn, that link together researchers and practitioners and developers and entrepreneurs and all of the people that you need to perform experiments, create products, deploy them effectively, study their efficacy, iterate quickly, and scale things that actually work. We can create these kinds of innovation clusters where you have highly instrumented sites, where these kind of collaborative relationships allow us to unlock learnings that we have struggled to do before. And you think about physical sites, but you could just as easily think about online sites as well. And then finally, we got to take some moonshots. We have to try and do the things that we couldn't imagine. Bloom's two standard deviation problem has stood too long. It's the problem not because we didn't know how to reach the two standard deviations, but because we didn't know how to do it at a price we were willing to pay. So now the question is, how do we do that? And I want to come back to this thing from Dr. Mubadi's talk. I fundamentally believe that one of the core drivers of inequality is our inability to scale what people need to thrive affordably. Where affordably means the price we are willing or able to pay and able to pay. So when we begin this work and don't do the science work, our children struggle. When we don't do this work in a way that we can take to scale, our children struggle. We need to do both. So anyone who has seen me speak in the last 10 years, I apologize, because this chart follows me everywhere. And I wish it would change, but so far it has not. We live in that bottom left-hand corner. Many of the interventions that we create don't make life-changing impact on children's lives, and even the ones that do fail to go to scale. When they do, it goes slowly, and that slope of that curve on improvement is very, very generous. So we've got to start doing things that allow us to dramatically improve on the outcomes, and that's what we hope to get out of both working with schools and teachers, but also the kind of learning science work that we talked about, so we can actually develop solutions that enable that kind of work. But there's something that we also have a new opportunity to do, which is to think very differently about scale. See, one of the really interesting things about technology, it's pretty important to remember, we're used to talking about it in terms of the access it provides. We're used to talking about it in terms of the ability to do mass customization. Many of you also think hard about the radical transparency it creates and the ability for us for the first time to be able to answer what works for whom in what context. What works for whom in what context, which is the question that has plagued us forever. And as we begin to learn to use these new apparatus, we can accelerate the pace at which we learn about learning and development and improve much more quickly. And it turns out that as you do that, the more you scale, the more it helps you, to the point where we figure out how to do it for the world. Now, I want to think about that for a second. When we apply the tools and resources that we've applied to almost every sector, to the education sector, to learning and development for young people, we have the potential to do all the things that we talked about, to unlock each person's potential, to do it in a way that is more affordable than anything we've ever done before, to learn more quickly about how to do it well and improve more quickly than we've ever done before. And so that is how and why technology as a tool fits in. We can never, ever, even as we create the most cool and innovative and breakthrough technologies, forget what we're trying to scale. And what we're trying to scale is those outcomes, those relationships, those experiences, and those environments that allow children to thrive and excel, that enable teachers to do the work of their lives, to do the things that they've dreamed of, so that they know their students well, so that they know how to attend to their needs, so that they can access the resources that are going to best serve them and their students at that moment. The things we ask the adults in our system to do are extraordinary, which by definition means some aren't going to be able to get it. So the question is, how do we give them what they need to succeed every time with every child? It's not that hard. So that's what we're going to be up to. We're going to see a lot from us about how we actually create these environments and create schools and support schools that are in the business of creating these very holistic approach to achieving outcomes for young people, where they recognize that that broad range of outcomes is not only what we want from them to be able to thrive in life, but what they need to be able to do even the things that we ask them to do in terms of performing in high academic levels. That we're attuned that this is something that every child needs, but that in particular it will benefit kids who haven't had access, who have been impacted by trauma, whose systems are biased against. That in fact, in those contexts, the mitigating force against them are these relationships. When they walk through environments and communities that don't feel safe, that landing in school that does feel safe, it matters. And by the way, we're not just talking about inner city schools where kids don't feel safe. We're going to do a lot of work around the learning science. We're both going to work on the front of how you do that rapid continuous improvement work in iterative science and engineering, taking that as science and figuring out how to apply it at scale. And we're also going to be doing that moonshot kind of work, and you'll be actually hearing a little bit from us about that in a little while. And then we'll be doing this work of building tools. Now, we've invested significantly in our first partner, Summit Learning. Mark and Priscilla went to visit Summit Public Schools in California and saw a school where the kids seemed on fire and the teachers were engaged and students could tell them what they were working on and why. And you saw students working together on projects. And the question was, how do you create that at scale? Like, why can't we see more of these? And they turned out that in order to run a school like that, that was that personalized to each individual student's needs and gave students that much agency in their direction, that the teachers had begun to put together sets of tools. And Mark asked, could he meet the engineers who were working on those tools? And Sam walked out. Like, yeah, the one guy. And he had done it all in Google Docs. and sheets probably, but you know, you get the point. And they said, we might be able to help. So now we have a team of engineers, a lot of former Google and Facebook and other folks who could be doing anything right now, focused on build tools and resources that let teachers and leaders create the kind of school environments where kids look like that, where they're that engaged, where they're that focused on problem solving, where they excel. Have we got it all right? Heck no. Are we on a path that I feel great about? Absolutely. Are we taking into consideration all the things that we talked about, building off the science, trying to build towards evidence? Absolutely. But our North Star is on what we're trying to do with the students and how we're trying to empower the teachers. We hope to be able to help change the world in that way, but we cannot do it alone. One of the things that I learned when I was in the administration is this thing called Joy's Law. It's very simple. It's very true. No matter who you are, most of the smartest people in the world don't work for you. Like, anybody want to argue it? So the question becomes, on these hard problems, how do we tap the genius of the world in more effective ways? And how do we bring together our collective learning in more effective ways, and more efficient ways, and more quickly? The work that we talk about a lot is, our phrase is listen, both to people's voices, especially those that are either living it or doing it. Learn fast, and then learn by doing. Because people can't wait. So that's the world that we're living in. That's the work that we're trying to do. Just need your help. I need folks to look at the Journal of Applied Developmental Science and understand what it says about malleability and plasticity and how it supports everything I said about human potential. I need you to think about what the research agenda needs to look like if you're a researcher, and push for the kinds of environments that allow you to do iterative research that turns into solutions that actually change people's lives. I appreciate the questions that are interesting to you, but I'm much more committed to changing people's lives. If you have technology talent, I need you to be thoughtful about the ways that you create solutions that actually meet needs, that build on what the science already teaches us, that reinforce the best habits, and makes the right thing to do the easy thing to do. If you're a funder, I need you to recognize that creating incentives for things that actually work is important. It's as important as starting things that may work. But most importantly, I need you to just think about your own kids and your own communities. When I think about my two sons, I think about those two paths and what it takes for me to guarantee that the sunny one is the one that comes. And the only way I know to do that is to make sure they're ready for it, because they have to create it for themselves. So if we all start there and then extend it just a little bit further, I think we can get it done. It will not be easy, and it will not be quick, but it will be beautiful. Thank you.